Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere grimy. Not dark exactly, more like smoke-thick air, a lot of foul smells, and a decent chance of infection. Imagine this, you're hunched over a wooden table in a cramped back alley of a medieval European town, and across from you is a man clutching his jaw, groaning like a dying ox. His breath smells like fermented onions mixed with despair. Behind him, a queue of equally miserable people waits, each holding a coin and a prayer. And you? You're their only hope. You are a 14th century dentist, or, well, the closest thing people have to one. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge to your stall at dawn, already exhausted. Your cloak smells like sweat, smoke, and something metallic, because it is. Blood leaves a particular scent when it's soaked into wool. You've got a small table, a battered chair, and a rusty tray of instruments that would give a modern dental hygienist night terrors. You haven't eaten yet, but that's probably for the best. Today will be messy. The first patient sits down, a man with swollen cheeks, pus crusted at the gum line, and an unmistakable scent of rot. You reach for your forceps, if you can call them that. They're more like blacksmith pliers, thick and not particularly precise. There's no sterilization. The tools were rinsed in a bucket last night, maybe. You've wiped them with your sleeve once this morning. You gesture for him to open wide. He does, reluctantly. The crowd watches. You dig around in his mouth, trying to grip a cracked molar. It's loose, hanging on by threads. One good yank and, crack, it's out. A glob of blood hits your wrist, and the man groans in pain. He holds up a copper penny. Payment. He doesn't say thank you, but he also doesn't stab you. That's a good start. Outside, children play near a cesspit. The town stinks of dung, smoke, and fish. You're working in the middle of it all. There's no official clinic. You're lucky to have a lean-to under the butcher's awning. The blood scent covers yours. People don't come to you for checkups. They come when they can't sleep for the pain, when their cheeks swell so badly they can't eat, or when a toothache convinces them death is near. Tooth pain, to the 14th century mind, isn't a dental issue, it's divine punishment. Or a bad omen. Sometimes it's the worms, tiny creatures that crawl into your mouth and gnaw at your nerves. And when they think they've got worms in their skulls, who do they go to? That's right, you. There's a rumor in your village that the dead can't feel pain, but living with a rotten tooth is worse than death. And today's the feast of Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of dentistry, not that most people know this. They just know they're in agony. You barely got any sleep last night. Your own teeth ache. The irony? You've already lost most of your molars. They rotted out years ago, back when you still chewed on street bread and boiled meat bones. You're gumming soup at 37 and still pulling teeth like your life depends on it. Because it kind of does. You glance down at your apron. It's stained a deep brown-black. Blood, spittle, maybe something worse. You think about rinsing it, then don't. It's better this way. People fear you a little when you look like a battlefield. That keeps the screamers quieter. You hear a soft cough, your next patient. A child. She's maybe 10, face drawn, eyes wide. Her mother stands behind her, wringing her hands in a dirty shawl. It's the back tooth, the woman says, not meeting your eyes. She can't sleep. You try to smile, but you know it comes off wrong. You don't have the tools for kids. You barely have tools, period. But you nod, and the girl opens her mouth. It's swollen, red, and one molar is black as charcoal. You know that look. It's not coming out without a fight. You reach for your iron hook. The crowd watches again. You make a show of confidence, even though your hands shake. You jab the hook under the decayed tooth and twist. The girl stiffens. A whimper leaks out of her. Her mother winces. You count down in your head, then pull. There's a sickening snap. The tooth gives. Blood gushes. The child gasps but doesn't scream. You admire her toughness. You hand the molar to her mother, who drops it into a rag pouch with a whispered prayer. Payment? A half loaf of bread. You accept. It's better than last week when someone tried to pay you in eel skins. Behind you, someone hawks phlegm into the street. A bell rings. Somewhere, a cow lowing. Life goes on. You're not a hero. You're barely a professional. But here, in this century, you're essential. You walk over to your bucket. It's full of cloudy water, bits of something floating inside. You rinse your tools as best you can and sit on your stool. For a moment, you just breathe. Then another patient sits. It's your neighbor, the one who complains about your chickens. He's holding his jaw, moaning like the devil himself is in his mouth. You'll enjoy this one just a little. Still, the day stretches ahead. You know how many people need you, and how few will thank you. You know the risks: one patient with plague, one slip of the blade, one bite too close to a bad wound, and you could be the one lying on the stone slab tomorrow. But you pick up your forceps again. Because even in this bloody, breath-stained, bone-dusty world, somebody has to pull the teeth. And unfortunately, it's you. You reach for your tray again, but really, you should call it what it is, a rust-pocked slab of metal that clatters like broken armor every time you set it down. The tools on it glint dully in the weak morning light, one pair of heavy iron tongs, a knife with a blackened edge, something that may once have been a chisel, and a long, thin hook that resembles a bent nail. If anyone's hoping for a mirror or a little handheld drill, well, they're in the wrong century. You've used all of these tools dozens, no, hundreds, of times. And not once has anyone cleaned them properly. Soap exists, yes, but it's mostly lye and pig fat. You're not exactly scrubbing for sterility. And boiling water? That's for dinner. You're not wasting fuel just so your pliers can be clean. Sometimes you wipe them on your cloak. Sometimes you spit on them. No one complains. If anything, a blood-stained blade reassures people. It says you've done this before. That you're not squeamish. Because squeamish people don't last long in this line of medieval work. They end up fainting, or worse, joining the patients. The tools clink again as you pick up the blade. Not for cutting, per se, but for scraping infected gum tissue away or prying apart fused molars. It doesn't cut cleanly. More like it tears. The edge isn't sharp anymore, it dulled years ago, but you don't have a whetstone, and honestly, sharpness might not make this process any less awful. Your next patient is a baker, strong and broad. His teeth are black at the base from years of chewing grainstone-contaminated flour. He has a hole in his premolar wide enough to hide a coin. When he opens his mouth, you instinctively flinch. It's not just the smell, it's the look. A jagged edge of gum is oozing something yellow, and his cheek is visibly swollen. You don't ask what he's been using to treat it, but you'd bet something like wine, ashes, or raw onion. You make a quick decision: it has to come out. He agrees. Or at least he grunts and gestures in a way that sounds like yes. You go in with the tongs, aiming for a quick extraction. But the tooth is stubborn. You twist. Then twist again. It finally gives way with a soft crunch, except the root stays behind. Now it's worse. You've got to dig for it. You mutter something about deep magic to distract him. His 2 days to laugh. You reach for your hook, that bent nail-like thing, and start scraping into the socket. Blood pours. The man twitches. A tooth root that's an inch long finally emerges, slippery and coated in pink. You wipe your hands on your apron. Again. Modern dentists have scalers, syringes, gloves, and tiny suction tubes. You have a medieval version of salad tongs and a handful of rags. Everything smells like iron. There's no such thing as disposable. You've been using the same pliers for 8 years. They're so worn down that one handle is wrapped in twine to keep it from slicing your palm. And then there's the hammer. It's not your favorite tool. But sometimes, when a molar refuses to move, you place the edge of the chisel between the tooth and the gum and give it a good whack. The sound it makes, dull, wet, final, is not something you ever get used to. You don't talk about it much. Neither do your patients. Because if you're at the point of using the hammer, they're probably beyond talking anyway. One time, a man bit down on your chisel mid-procedure. Broke the blade. Broke 2 of his own teeth in the process. You gave him a deal, 2 extractions for the price of 1. He didn't laugh either. Across Europe, there's no standard dental kit. Some barbers use bone saws and curved scrapers. Others improvise with blacksmith tools. Historians still argue whether any actual dental instruments existed as a separate category back then, or if everything was borrowed from other trades. What's certain is this: no one's making instruments for finesse. They're made to survive, not to heal. And even the best of them are haunted with the grime of 100 previous mouths. You know a guy downriver who uses a fishhook for extractions. Says it's faster. But he's lost 3 patients in the last 6 months. One bled out. Another got jaw rot. The third, well, he got better. And then spread rumors that the hook was cursed. Now that guy's clinic sits empty. No one wants haunted dentistry. People can barely survive regular dentistry. You have a soft spot for the curved blade, even though it cuts crooked. It's nimble enough to get under infected gum. And when a patient passes out from the pain, you can do a lot more, a lot faster. The unconscious ones don't flail. That's an underrated feature in this line of work. One of your favorite tools is actually just a long nail you've bent into a loop. You use it to scoop abscesses. Once, it slipped. You cut your finger. It got infected. You nearly lost the hand. You slept with your arm raised above your head for 6 days, convinced you were going to die. You didn't. But you still don't feel your pinky on cold mornings. Someone once gifted you a bag of herbs and said it would purify your instruments. It smelled like burnt thyme and mold. You thanked them, then used it to freshen your hut. The tool stayed unwashed. There are fancier instruments in the big cities. People talk about the famous surgeon Guy de Chauliac, who supposedly had real, handcrafted dental pliers. But even he believed tooth-pulling was a last resort. Too bad no one else agrees. Most of your clients show up begging for it, long after other options are gone. Sometimes, when you finish a hard day, you look down at your tools and wonder if they feel guilty. But then you remember, you're the one holding them. The tray clatters again as you pick up your last tool of the day, a blunt hook worn smooth with use. Tomorrow, it might break. Tomorrow, your hand might slip. But today, it's enough. You pull the curtain on your stall and step back. Behind you, the tray waits. Dull metal, dark stains, old pain. And tomorrow, it begins again. The sun has barely climbed, and already you're elbow deep in the battlefield of mouths. But before the blood, before the crude hooks and the coin-stained teeth, there's the question no one dares ask you directly: how on earth did you end up here? Because you didn't choose this profession. No one does. It's not exactly a childhood dream to yank teeth out of screaming strangers beside a dung-slicked alley. But when you're born poor in the 14th century and unlucky enough to have steady hands, you're fair game. Maybe your uncle was a barber. Maybe your father died of an abscess before your eyes, and you swore never to let someone else suffer like that. Or maybe you were a failed apprentice to a bone setter, kicked out for botching a dislocation, and ended up pulling teeth because, in a town where most jobs are locked behind guild doors, dental work is one of the few where credentials don't matter, just guts, tools, and the willingness to ignore screaming. Your first extraction? You remember it vividly. A tanner's boy, not much older than you, swollen and desperate. You used fire tongs from the forge, heated them to what you thought was the right temperature, not knowing it would only blister the gum and make the bleeding worse. You pulled and tugged and sobbed through the whole thing while the boy passed out from pain. When it was over, he survived. Barely. You didn't sleep for 2 days. But people started coming. Word spread. And suddenly, you were the one who knows teeth. In truth, you're just slightly better at guessing than the next person. But guesswork, in this era, is expertise. You never joined a guild. You weren't allowed. Dentistry is considered too base, too messy, too unholy. Real surgeons, cloaked in formality and Latin, don't stoop to the mouth. That's for barbers. For tinkers. For people like you. Though barber surgeons technically include tooth pullers in their scope, most of them would rather amputate a limb than probe a molar. Teeth are dirty. They rot. They stink. And there's no prestige in it. You live somewhere between respect and revulsion. People fear you because your hands wield pain, but they also need you. Badly. They tolerate your presence at festivals, your corner booth near the fishmonger, your little sign carved with a molar and a bleeding mouth. But they whisper when you pass. They don't invite you to feast days. No one flirts with the dentist. You often wonder if the blacksmiths have it better. Sure, they hammer metal all day, but they get respect. People thank them. You? You're lucky if they spit after you're done. Every now and then, someone accuses you of witchcraft. They say your extractions are too quick, or that no one should know so much about the body. One woman claimed you whispered incantations before you pulled her husband's tooth. You were actually just muttering curses under your breath because he kicked you in the shin. Once, a priest asked if you were dabbling in forbidden arts. You asked him if he wanted to extract his own molar. He said no. That was the end of it. Still, you've had to move towns twice because of suspicion. People are terrified of anything that deals with blood and pain. Unless, of course, it's during war. Then it's fine. Speaking of blood, it follows you. It soaks your cuffs, crusts beneath your nails, and dries in the folds of your palms. You try washing, but in this century, water's more dangerous than dirt half the time. You settle for wiping your hands on straw or cloth or your own tunic. You gave up trying to stay clean years ago. Now, you lean into the filth. It makes you look seasoned. The saddest truth? You're probably healthier than your patients. Your hands might be cracked and your teeth half missing, but you've built up resistance. You haven't died of infection yet. And that makes you, by medieval standards, basically a medical marvel. Still, there's always risk. One patient with the wrong kind of rot, gangrene, plague, or something nameless, and you could be next. You've seen colleagues waste away weeks after treating someone with bad blood. Historians still argue whether those early dentists understood contagion or just got lucky avoiding it. But you have your own theory. Paranoia is a survival skill. You keep a pouch of dried herbs on you, lavender, sage, garlic skin, not because they work, necessarily, but because they make your nose wrinkle less at the stench. And some people believe they ward off spirits. Honestly, if a spirit wants to hang around this mess, you figure they probably deserve to. Apprentices? You've had 2. Both ran after a week. One fainted during an abscess lancing. The other broke a tool in a patient's mouth and fled town before the man could find him again. You've stopped trying. It's a lonely trade, but it's quieter that way. Sometimes you dream of retirement. A quiet farm. Goats. Maybe even a toothless wife who's grateful you kept her alive through your craft. But you know that's a fantasy. You'll probably die with a pair of pliers in your hand, elbow deep in someone else's misery. But for now, the line grows again. Someone offers you a rag soaked in vinegar to sanitize your fingers. Another holds out a silver coin, shaking. You nod. You're the town dentist. Not by training. Not by title. Just by necessity. And by now, you're used to it. You roll your shoulders as the sun creeps higher over the rooftops. Another long day ahead, and your back already feels like it belongs to someone twice your age. You flex your hands. They're cracked, sore, and permanently tinged with iron and ash. It's not just the weight of your tools, it's the weight of something else, decisions. Because being a 14th century dentist isn't just about yanking teeth. It's about playing judge, jury, and reluctant executioner in the court of oral misery. Take this next case, a boy, maybe 12, dragged in by his mother. He's crying so hard he can barely breathe, cheeks flushed, jaw swollen like a bruised melon. You try to calm him, but soothing words aren't your specialty. You poke gently along the gum line with a curved nail, and he shrieks. His mother winces, gripping his arms to hold him still. Now you've got choices, and none of them good. If you try to drain the abscess, there's a chance it works. The swelling could go down, the pain could subside. But there's no guarantee the infection won't come roaring back tomorrow, worse than ever. If you extract the tooth, you risk breaking it or damaging his jaw. And if you do nothing, he might die in 3 days when the infection slips into his bloodstream. Death by toothache. It happens more often than anyone admits. This is what you face every day, risk assessments, based on little more than your gut, a few grisly experiences, and whatever weird trick the village herbalist told you last month. And people think dentistry is simple. You opt to drain it. There's no anesthesia, no numbing gel. Just a sharp blade and a steady hand. You press gently, then slice. The boy screams again, then goes limp, either from relief or sheer pain. Pus bursts like a bubble. The smell is something between rotten eggs and despair. You catch most of it on a rag. Some gets on your sleeve. Of course. You pack the socket with moss, yes, moss, which some old Roman scroll says might draw out the poison. Does it work? Who knows? But it's either that or leaving the wound wide open. It's easy to forget, in a world without microscopes or sterile rooms, that the tiniest wrong move might kill someone days later. Not from your hand, but from what you let inside. And yet, ironically, patients trust you. Not because you always save them, but because you try. They bring you gifts. A hunk of cheese, a fish, once even a hen. You don't ask for payment beyond coins, but in a village where people trade more than they spend, food keeps you alive. That, and the occasional swig of ale between appointments. One time, someone brought you a scroll, parchment with smudged illustrations of human teeth, probably copied from a monk's anatomy manual. You stared at it for hours, mesmerized by the idea that somewhere, someone understood this puzzle better than you. But the scroll was vague, and the teeth were drawn like they belonged to a horse. Still, you kept it. And still, you guess. Constantly. Because 14th century medicine isn't a science, it's art mixed with luck, dashed with desperation, and painted in blood. Your greatest diagnostic tool is your own nose. Infection has a smell. Rot has a temperature. You can tell by the color of the gum line if it's too late. That's when the hardest decisions come. You once treated a miller with what you thought was a basic molar abscess. He insisted on a poultice of mashed nettles and beer. You warned him, but he was stubborn. By the time he returned 3 days later, the left side of his face was black and hard. You didn't even try to cut it. You just made him comfortable and sat with him as he died. That kind of failure doesn't leave. You carry it like a second cloak. Historians still argue whether medieval dentists had any understanding of systemic infection, or if they just saw some wounds get worse and decided the patient had bad humors. You've heard both explanations, but what matters is what you see with your own eyes, mouths that kill as surely as any sword. And yet, you work. Every day. You choose the lesser evil. You tell yourself you're doing your best. There's no respite. Even at night, people knock on your door. One came last week, sobbing and clutching his jaw. He begged you to take it out before the sun rises. You did, by candlelight, hands trembling from fatigue, vision blurring. The bleeding wouldn't stop. You stuffed linen into the socket, and the man fainted in your arms. You thought he'd die right there. He didn't. But you did vomit later. That night, you dreamed you were pulling out your own teeth. And in that dream, they laughed at you. You wake up sweating often now. Your town has no healer. The herb which 2 valleys over won't cross into your village because someone burned her cousin. So, in a way, you are the doctor. The healer. The person people bring. They're bleeding, they're broken, they're hopeless. And it's not just about teeth anymore. You've been asked to lance boils, set jaws, even deliver babies. You're not qualified for any of it, but when someone's desperate and there's no priest, no midwife, and no surgeon, they come to you. Because at least you try. You once sewed a man's tongue back together. He bit it nearly in half during a seizure. You used a needle made for repairing boots. He couldn't speak properly for weeks. But he survived. To be a 14th century dentist is to constantly wade into uncertainty and pretend you know what you're doing. It's an act, every time. And yet, oddly, that act becomes reality. You do know more now than you did a year ago. Or 5. Pain teaches fast. Even if the lessons are cruel. You pour a bit of vinegar on your hands before the next patient. Not because it helps much, but because it feels like control. It's your ritual. A small defense against a world full of microbes you can't see, bodies you can't fix, and choices that are rarely right but must be made anyway. You step outside your stall and breathe in the sharp morning air. People are waiting. You lift your head. Time to choose again. You're halfway through your second patient of the morning, and your hands are already stiff. A wiry shepherd with breath like swamp water is gripping the arms of your chair so tightly you swear they might splinter. He keeps mumbling prayers through clenched teeth, which is unhelpful, because you can't tell if he's pleading with God or cursing your ancestors. Then comes the moment you both dread, removing the molar. It's blackened and cracked like old leather, buried deep behind a gum line that's swollen and bleeding. You brace yourself, slide your iron hook beneath the tooth, and pull. Nothing. Again. A snap, a crack, a wet crunch. He screams and punches your leg reflexively. You mutter something unrepeatable and go back in. When it finally gives, it comes out with a squelch and a spray of blood that hits your cheek like a slap. You wipe it off with the back of your sleeve, bite down your lunch rising in your throat, and drop the tooth into the tin cup at your side with a wet clink. The patient thanks you between gasps, slipping you a bent coin and a boiled egg. Payment complete. There's no clinic here, just a wooden stall you set up each day on the muddy edge of the market square. A rickety bench for the patient, a low stool for yourself, and your bag of dreadful little tools laid out on a cloth that hasn't been properly cleaned since spring. You've got your hook, your pincers, your flat-ended prying blade, and your trusty mallet, not for the faint of heart. Some call your setup a tooth stand. Others call it the screaming corner. Either is accurate. Because, let's be honest, this job is 70% pain, 20% mess, and 10% trying to look like you know what you're doing. You sit back, stretch your arms, and glance at the queue. For more faces grimacing, jaws wrapped in linen, eyes full of desperation and fear. No one comes to you lightly. They come when they can't eat, can't sleep, can't stand the agony any longer. You are their last hope. Or, occasionally, their worst decision. But what choice do they have? There are no toothbrushes in this century. No antiseptic rinses or floss. If they're lucky, villagers scrub their teeth with frayed sticks dipped in ashes or salt. If they're lucky. Mostly, people chew bones, rot their mouths on dried fruits and beer, and hope for the best. You remember one man who came to you swearing he could feel the worm inside his tooth. Yes, a worm. He said it whispered to him when he tried to sleep. Now, before you scoff, you should know that for centuries, the tooth worm theory was not only common, it was the explanation for tooth decay. You've even seen little carved charms meant to drive the worm away. Historians still argue whether this belief stemmed from metaphor or mistranslated medical lore from earlier civilizations. But in your world? Worms were as real as your tools. You played along, of course. told him you'd chase the creature out. You soaked a bit of thread in garlic water, wound it around the tooth, waited for his breath to slow, and then yanked so fast his head snapped forward. The worm, if it existed, never returned. You clean your tools now, well, clean in the medieval sense. You wipe the blood off with a cloth that's seen better centuries. If you're feeling fancy, you dip your blades in wine. Once, you tried heating them over flame, but too many patients flinched at the smoke, thinking you'd gone mad. Not that madness is out of place here. You've seen things that would make a seasoned executioner gag. Mouths so decayed the jawbone shows through. Tongues swollen to twice their size. One man's palate was crawling with some kind of blackened mold, and you sent him to a priest instead. If God couldn't fix it, no one could. Occasionally, someone wants you to install something. A false tooth. A plug. A way to hide the gaping holes your work leaves behind. You've tried pieces of bone, wood, even ivory if they're rich. But they rarely stay in place. One woman swallowed hers in her sleep. Another got an infection so bad you could smell it before she entered the stall. Still, you experiment. You carve bits of horn into crude shapes, grind them down, and tuck them into sockets. Sometimes, it almost works. You're no artisan, but desperation makes you inventive. Some days are worse than others. Rainy days, for example, are misery. Mud clogs your boots. Your cloth roof leaks. Your instruments slip in your fingers. You once dropped your pincers into the gutter mid-procedure. You cleaned them off and kept going. What else could you do? Then there are feast days. People drink too much, brawl in the square, and end up breaking teeth on tankards or tumbling face first into cobblestones. You become the unofficial emergency responder. You've reset more jaws in the dark than you can count. Once, someone knocked loose a tooth during a mummers play, and they insisted you glue it back before the next act. You tried. It fell out again during his monologue. Your reputation? Mixed, at best. Some call you the tooth saint. Others call you the bleeder. You've overheard children chant rhymes about how you collect teeth to build a castle. You're not sure if you should be flattered or disturbed. And yes, people do bring you teeth. For luck. For trade. As offerings. You've got a pouch full of them now, tucked beneath your cot. You tell yourself it's for study. But honestly, you don't know why you keep them. Maybe it's a reminder. Maybe it's the only kind of legacy you can afford. You've started carving tiny initials into your tools. Just in case someone finds them someday and wonders who dared to pull teeth without training. Without permission. Without fear. Well, you had fear. Still do. But you keep going. Because someone has to. It's midday now, and your knees ache from crouching. You lean against the corner of your stall, sipping a thin broth someone bartered for a tooth extraction. It's mostly turnip water, but you drink it anyway. Warmth counts for something. As you watch the crowd mill past, farmers haggling over onions, a boy juggling apples, a monk preaching to no one in particular, you spot someone new. A traveler. His clothes are finer than the usual fare, though caked in dust. A deep cowl shadows his face, but there's no mistaking that limp or the way he cradles his jaw. He approaches cautiously. You straighten. He doesn't speak, just tilts his head slightly, revealing a mouth you immediately regret seeing. The gums are red and jagged, teeth misaligned like broken tombstones. One canine is missing entirely, the others are dark with rot. The smell hits you next, a wave of sweet, festering decay that makes your eyes water. This isn't your usual village complaint. This is advanced. And something else. You gesture for him to sit. He shakes his head. Instead, he opens a leather pouch and pulls out a tiny tool you've never seen before, a delicate, curved, clearly foreign. He holds it up, then points at his mouth. Not a patient, then. A peer? You motion for him to follow you behind your curtain. There, under the shadows, the two of you speak in hushed fragments of Latin, bits of French. You piece it together. He's been trained in Italy, he says, or maybe Avignon. He uses words like incisor and necrosis, and for the first time in your career, you're not the smartest one in the room. He shows you how he sharpens his tools with river stones, how he binds wounds with boiled linen soaked in red wine and egg whites, allegedly to seal the tissues. It sounds absurd. But his hands are steady. His teeth, though few, are straight and clean. He asks to see your implements. You lay them out, embarrassed now by your soot-darkened pincers and crude prying blade. He examines them with a professional's eye, then nods approvingly at your mallet. He produces a thin sliver of ivory from his pouch, perfectly carved, smooth as bone. It's a replacement tooth, fitted into a copper bracket. You stare in awe. He places it gently on your cloth and motions for you to keep it. You do. For the rest of the afternoon, you sit together, side by side, watching each other work. He helps a butcher's wife with an incisor that started to split. Instead of pulling it, he files it smooth with tiny strokes, then paints a mixture of crushed herbs and vinegar over the wound. It stings, but she doesn't scream. She thanks him. It's the first time you've seen real dentistry. Not just survival work. You learn more in 3 hours than in your last 3 years. He teaches you how to seat a patient to reduce strain, how to use a flat stick to depress the tongue, how to recognize the yellow-green tinge of a spreading gum infection before it reaches the bloodstream. He even shows you a trick for reducing swelling with a goose feather dipped in cooled oil. Historians still argue whether such traveling practitioners were licensed or merely lucky. Some call them tooth drawers. Others, charlatans. But standing beside him, you know, this man has studied. Somewhere, people are being taught this craft. You feel the ground shift under you. Before he leaves, he draws a symbol on your stall, 2 teeth crossing like swords. You ask what it means. He smiles, revealing a silver cap where a molar should be. Safe hands, he says in broken tongue. Then he vanishes into the fog of afternoon. You think about him that night as you clean your hands with wine and wrap your tools more carefully than ever before. You polish the ivory tooth and set it on your shelf. It gleams even in the dark. From then on, your work changes. You start boiling your linen. You rinse every tool before reuse, even when water is scarce. You start cutting your own replacement teeth from oak, shaping them slowly, fitting them with the patience of a sculptor. Some work. Some don't. But your fingers are steadier now. More deliberate. Word spreads. People come from further away. One day, a merchant visits from the coast, asking if you can cap a broken tooth with silver. You've never done it before. But you try. You carve a thin shell from pewter, fit it as best you can, and bind it with thread. It lasts 4 days. He still pays you double. Another man, a baker, begs you to save a front tooth. His wife is threatening to leave him. You file it down, smooth the edges, even scrub it with vinegar and chalk to make it look white. It doesn't last long, but long enough for his wedding anniversary. You count that as a win. Eventually, people stop flinching when they see your stall. Some even smile. One day, a child approaches, not with pain, but with curiosity. He asks how teeth grow. You draw him a picture in the dirt with a stick, explaining roots and crowns as best you can. He listens like it's magic. And in a way, it is. You begin keeping notes. Scratches on parchment, crude sketches, symbols only you understand. You write about which teeth come loose at what age. About how pain travels. About the difference between swelling and fever. You call it your tooth book. It's not fancy, but it's yours. Still, you make mistakes. Always. You break a molar on a noblewoman and her guards rough you up. A child dies 2 days after a routine pull. You think the infection got into his chest. You lose sleep. You wake up cold. But when the sun rises, you set up again. You tie your apron. You lay out your cloth. You whisper a prayer, not to saints, but to memory. You think of the traveler. The silver tooth. The shared glance between people who know. And you get to work. You're deep into summer now, and the heat is not your friend. Sweat rolls down your spine before the morning bread carts even creak past. The air smells like unwashed bodies, horse dung, and something metallic you've learned to ignore. Your fingers stick to your tools. Flies hover around the blood-crusted cloth that once passed for sanitary. You flick one away with the back of your wrist, then immediately regret it, wiping sweat and gore across your own cheek like some medieval war paint. Your first patient of the day is a cooper's apprentice, barely 15, with hands tougher than most grown men and a half-shattered incisor. He cracked it on a miss-swung hoop while barrel making. A jagged wedge still juts from his gum like a knife. You know the kind of pain it's causing because his eyes won't meet yours. He's terrified. You offer him a sliver of willow bark to chew, a weak, natural painkiller, and talk him through it. Calm tone. Gentle hands. You wedge a block between his molars to keep his jaw steady, position your fingers just so, and twist. The crack echoes louder than it needs to. He doesn't cry, but tears roll down his cheeks anyway. You don't judge. You remember what it felt like the first time you pulled one, with trembling hands, from a man who outweighed you by 6 stone. You still dream about that one. You still feel the crunch in your wrists. You drop the tooth into your tin bowl and dab the boy's lip with vinegar-soaked linen. You've learned it stings less if you hum softly as you work. Not because it helps the patient. Because it helps you. He gives you a slice of smoked eel in thanks. It's still warm. And that's when you realize something strange has started happening. You're being asked to teach. It starts subtly. A woman asks if her daughter can watch you work to learn how to keep mouths clean. A monk stops by your stall with a scroll full of medical queries, Latin phrases you don't fully understand, but try your best to answer. You start getting visits from curious apprentices, scribes, and even one nervous gravedigger who claims a bad teeth carry ghosts. You're flattered. Mostly. But also, a little worried. Because the more people ask you questions, the more you realize just how much you don't know. How long before they ask something you can't fake? Something that reveals just how little training you really have? You feel that creeping imposter fear most sharply when a traveling noble sends word his wife refuses to eat, racked with tooth pain, and he'll pay well if you'll come to their manor. It's the first time you've been invited indoors for your work. You scrub your hands till they're raw, oil your tools, and dress in the least stained tunic you own. When you arrive, they make you walk around the back and enter through the servant's door. Of course they do. The lady is reclining on a feather-stuffed bench in a room that smells like violets and tallow. Her face is pale, jaw swollen, and you can see where someone else, likely a leeching monk, has already failed her. You approach, slowly. You nod. You ask her permission before touching her chin. She nods, barely. Her breath is shallow. The molar is loose. Almost ready. You make the call and extract it in one clean motion, murmuring softly the entire time. She gasps. Then, mercifully, she smiles. The noble pays you with an entire smoked ham and a bag of coin so heavy it thuds against your leg all the way home. You don't tell anyone where it came from. Just tuck it under your cot and sleep on it like a dragon with its hoard. You start upgrading things. You line your stall with canvas to block the wind. You buy a second cloth so one can hang dry while the other stays clean. You commission a boy to sharpen your tools twice a week and give him a tooth-shaped badge you carved yourself. He wears it proudly. You even begin your own kind of record keeping. Not just notes, but illustrations. Diagrams of jaws, gum lines, stages of rot. You draw what you see. You draw what you wish you could do. You dream of shaping silver caps, wiring in replacement teeth, of mouthwashes brewed from herbs that do more than sting. But it's all theory. Hope wrapped in ink. Then winter comes, and your work changes again. People huddle indoors. Toothaches fester under layers of wool. Infections run faster through families trapped by snow and sickness. You become something between doctor and priest. You're called to homes in the dark. You work by candlelight. You carry your bag in your cloak like a relic. One night, you're summoned by torchlight to a small stone house on the edge of the village. A boy, maybe 10 years old, has a fever so high he's stopped speaking. His jaw is bloated to twice its size. His mother is frantic. She begs you to save him. You touch the swelling and feel the heat radiating through the bone. This is not just a toothache. This is an abscess. You boil linen in her hearth, soak it with wine, and press it to his skin. He moans, barely conscious. You whisper to the mother, quietly, grimly, that there's a way to relieve the pressure. But it's not pleasant. She agrees before you finish the sentence. You do what must be done. You make a small incision just below the jawline. The pus sprays with a hiss, foul and yellow. The smell is unbelievable. The mother sobs. The boy doesn't wake. But he survives. You stay with them that night, holding compresses, cooling his brow. By dawn, he's breathing easier. The mother gives you her husband's old boots as thanks. They fit better than yours ever did. And still, despite it all, the work continues. Because in the 14th century, you don't get breaks. You don't get pensions. You don't even get a clean place to sleep. You work until your hands shake and your back gives out. You pull teeth in rainstorms, in barns, in graveyards. You once removed a molar behind a tavern outhouse, lit only by moonlight and the patient's fire breath. That one's a story you only tell after a few ales. But you never stop. Because somehow, in this cruel, painful, blood-soaked role, you found something rare. Not glory. Not fame. Certainly not comfort. But usefulness. And in this world? That's something to hold on to. Your hands have become instruments. Not graceful ones, certainly not the soft, lily-white fingers of a court musician, but tools with a memory all their own. You can now feel the exact moment when a tooth is ready to give way, the faintest click or shift under pressure that tells you, yes, now. Your fingers know how to twist just enough without cracking the jaw. How to nudge an abscess without bursting it in the wrong direction. How to calm a panicked patient with a simple rhythm of pressure and release. You didn't mean to become this. But here you are. It's spring again, and with it comes fresh faces, traders from Bruges, pilgrims returning from Canterbury, even a few peddlers whispering about distant lands like Granada or Cathay. They bring new ailments, new infections, new teeth unlike any you've seen before, strange molar shapes, diets that stain enamel black, gums that swell in ways that defy your notes. You're always learning. Sometimes from success. More often from failure. One day, a spice merchant from the Low Countries appears at your stall with a problem you've never encountered before. His entire jawline seems to tremble when he bites, and there's a hollow echo in his speech. You peer into his mouth and find nothing. Literally, nothing. For back teeth are missing, but the gums haven't healed. Instead, there are strange pits, open, raw, and somehow dry. He tells you he chews clove bark and quicklime mixed with tobacco. A new habit. Fashionable. You can smell the remnants. It burns your nose. You try your best. Rinse. Stitch. Pack the holes with salt and marjoram, as some sailors swear it helps. He leaves with less pain, but no promises. And you begin to worry about the world moving faster than you can keep up. Because even as you build your little practice, you hear whispers of things changing elsewhere. Someone swears they saw a surgeon in Avignon cauterize a gum infection with a glowing metal rod. Another man claims his cousin had a golden tooth implanted in Milan. Most of this is probably nonsense, drunk tales mixed with wishful thinking, but not all of it. Historians still argue whether true dentistry as a medical science had formal roots in the 14th century or whether it remained folkcraft masquerading as medicine. The answer likely lies somewhere in between. But for you? The lines blur more with each passing season. One thing is certain, mouths are becoming political. Especially noble mouths. A duke from the southern provinces sends for you one morning. You're escorted to his estate by 2 horsemen in matching crests. You sit beside tapestries that probably cost more than your entire stall. And then, without preamble, you're shown to the duke's wife. She has 5 perfect teeth. That's it. 5. The rest are gone, eaten away by time, childbirth, poor diet, and what she coyly refers to as tonics. She cannot chew meat. She cannot speak clearly. She is, by noble standards, a scandal. You are expected to fix this. So, you make a bold suggestion. Not because you're confident, but because you're desperate. You offer to craft her a set of false front teeth using wood and beeswax. The idea is ridiculous. Unheard of. Possibly punishable. But she agrees. You carve for days. You use birch for flexibility and gum resin to seal it against the palate. You mold the base to her mouth as best you can. You even dye the tips with chalk and crushed rosemary to whiten them. When you fit the piece in, it almost looks like teeth. She cries when she sees herself in the polished copper mirror. That night, you're fed veal stew and bread soaked in honey. The Duchess says nothing, but presses a pouch of gold into your palm with surprising strength. As you leave, you realize her speech has improved already. You never see her again. But the following week, 3 other noble households send requests. Word has traveled fast. And now, people want not just healing, but vanity. You're suddenly being asked to whiten smiles, replace missing teeth with carved bridges, even tattoo a family crest onto a molar. You decline that one, obviously. You get strange commissions, lovers who want to gift their beloved a necklace of their own extracted teeth. Widows who want a tooth of the deceased inlaid into a ring. One woman requests a tooth gilded in real gold so her enemies know she's smiling. You do what you can. You begin experimenting. Boiling chalk in wine. Scraping bone thin enough to mold. Heating copper to flatten into clamps. You're no alchemist, but necessity makes you inventive. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. The village barber begins spreading rumors. Claims you're dabbling in sorcery by altering nature. That your tools speak to demons. One night, you find a dead bird nailed to your stall. A warning. You ignore it. Mostly. But at night, you begin locking your shutters. And you start hiding your notes. Not out of shame, but because your work now feels fragile. Like a candle flickering against wind. You don't want to give anyone an excuse to blow it out. Then comes the letter. Delivered by a courier with dusty boots and a wax seal you don't recognize. It's addressed to the tooth worker of the Northern Road. Inside, in elegant French, is an invitation. To a gathering. A symposium, they call it. Healers. Surgeons. Herbals. Midwives. A secret meeting to discuss bodily art and share methods. Not sanctioned by church or crown. Underground. But real. Your hands shake as you reread the words. You never imagine being invited to anything, much less something that smells of history in the making. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you lay in bed, staring at the rafters, wondering. Are you really ready? You've pulled hundreds of teeth. Saved dozens of lives. Made people smile again. But you've also made mistakes. Hurt people. Bled them. Watched them suffer in ways you couldn't fix. You remember the boy who coughed blood after a molar extraction and didn't last the week. The woman whose abscess returned after you assured her it wouldn't. The child whose mouth locked shut from a jaw infection, so tight you couldn't even force in water. You remember all of them. And still, you decide to go. Because if you're going to carry this strange, bloody, misunderstood profession on your back, maybe it's time to share the weight. So you pack your things, your tools, your notes, your diagrams. The ivory tooth the traveler gave you. The birch carving you made for the Duchess. The metal pin you once bent into a hook that accidentally worked better than anything else. You leave a note on your stall, closed for repairs. Be back soon. And you start walking. Toward the unknown. Toward others like you. Toward the beginning of something that might, just might, be called science. The journey to the symposium takes you through unfamiliar towns, and for the first time in years, you're not carrying your tools just to work, but to learn. You feel exposed without the comfort of your usual stall, your routine. But something deeper stirs inside you, or a cautious hope that you're not alone in this strange trade. You reach the gathering place after 5 days on foot, an abandoned monastery tucked in a wooded valley, half swallowed by ivy. The meeting is held under candlelight in what used to be a refectory, now filled with whispers, rustling parchment, and the smell of boiled herbs. And you're not ready. Because these people, these so-called bodily artists, they're impressive. A Moorish healer with calloused hands who claims to cauterize cavities with heated bronze pegs. A Flemish bone setter who's created a splint that allows broken jaws to heal aligned. A Jewish herbalist who has mapped every nerve in the face based on rabbinical texts and his own years of experimentation. There's even a woman from Bologna who calls herself a chirurgeon, though the church doesn't recognize her title. They speak with confidence. With knowledge. You try not to feel small. When your turn comes, you show them your wooden tooth model. Your beeswax moldings. Your drawings. You talk about pulling teeth by lantern light in barns and breweries. You describe the vinegar-soaked linen, the oiling of instruments, the willow bark for pain. And they listen. Really listen. The Moorish man nods approvingly. The herbalist leans forward and jots something down. Someone murmurs that you've done all this without university training. You want to laugh. What university would even consider you? Later that night, over weak wine and stale bread, you sit with the bone setter and share a quiet moment. He tells you he once broke a man's jaw just trying to pull a canine with a crooked hook. You tell him about the girl who lost half her tongue to rot and bit through a leather strap trying to endure the pain. Too much blood, he says, eyes far away. Always, you reply. Historians still argue whether gatherings like this truly existed in the 14th century, informal symposia of healers from diverse traditions, defying religious borders and class divides. Some say it's romanticized nonsense. Others point to scribbled marginalia in obscure manuscripts suggesting otherwise. Whatever the truth, here in this crumbling monastery, the idea of shared knowledge suddenly feels less like fantasy and more like necessity. Because every person here knows the truth, the mouth is dangerous. It's the entry to the lungs, the gut, the blood. A gateway, yes, but also a battlefield. Tiny infections kill giants. A chipped tooth can become a death sentence. One misplaced jab, one unsanitized knife, one broken molar lodged too deep, and the body becomes its own worst enemy. No one says it out loud, but you all feel it. So, the symposium doesn't end with lectures. It ends with agreements. To share notes. To correspond via couriers. To pass along tools, recipes, diagrams, stories. One day, maybe, even to write a book together, an anatomy of the face, a guide to the mouth. You know this book may never exist. But the idea is warm enough to carry home. And when you do return home, you find your stall untouched. The note is still flapping in the breeze. A neighbor's boy runs to tell you 3 people came asking for you, and someone left a sack of turnips with a tooth tied to the string. That's how they pay you now, with food, trinkets, sometimes teeth they pulled themselves. Tokens of trust. The first person you see is the widow of the miller. Her youngest boy chipped a tooth on a blackened apple seed. Nothing urgent, but she says he won't let anyone else touch his face. So, you clean your hands. Unwrap your tools. Set down your new beeswax mold from the symposium. And you begin again. Something is different now, though. You're not just a street puller. Not just the last resort before gangrene. You're becoming something more. You make a chart for the boy, just like the herbalist taught you. You test his bite with dry bread. You file the edge smooth with a stone you've soaked in salt water. You explain each step to the boy as you work, even though he probably understands none of it. But you need to speak it aloud. To solidify the process. To remind yourself this isn't just guesswork anymore. And from there, the months blur into a new rhythm. You organize your stall with fresh symbols, a copper tooth hanging from a string, a wax seal to close wrapped teeth, a small clay figure with its mouth open, used to show children what's about to happen before it does. Parents begin calling you gentle. Not always true, but kind of flattering. Some nights, you even dream of building a room, a real indoor space, for your work. With a table that doesn't wobble. A water barrel for washing. Shelves for pastes and powders. A chair that leans back. Maybe one day. Then, the church visits. A minor friar, sent by the local abbot, appears at your stall and watches silently for the better part of an hour. You pretend not to notice, but your hands are shaking by the time he finally speaks. He doesn't accuse you of heresy. He doesn't even mention alchemy or curses. Instead, he asks, "Have you ever read Hildegard of Bingen?" You blink. No, you admit. Only heard the name. She believed ailments of the mouth were born from imbalance of winds in the body, he says. Not sin. Not punishment. Just imbalance. You don't know what to say. You certainly don't want to challenge a friar. But he just nods and offers you a small scroll, herbal notes and diagrams. It's the most valuable thing you've ever held. You thank him, and as he leaves, he mutters, "God heals through hands, too. Not just prayer." You sleep with the scroll under your cot that night. And the night after. It's easy to romanticize this life from the comfort of the modern day, to imagine your rough wooden tools and herbal pastes as quaint precursors to dentistry, like some primitive apprenticeship before white coats and sterile gloves. But you know the truth. This is real work. Messy, thankless, often terrifying. Every open mouth is a gamble. Every infection a ticking clock. And still, day after day, you return to the same seat, the same tools, the same trembling eyes across from you. Because people are in pain. And in the 14th century, there aren't many who dare to fix it. So you do. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. There's a knock at your door before sunrise. Not the urgent pounding of a crisis, no blood, no screams, but a slow, deliberate tapping. Rhythmic. 3 times. Then silence. You rise stiffly from your cot, the cold air biting your legs as you pull your tunic around you. You unlatch the wooden door and find a young man standing there, pale as frost, cradling his cheek with one hand. His lips are cracked. His breath fogs in the cold. "I heard you can fix it," he whispers, lifting his chin. You tilt his face toward the early light. His jaw is swollen, hard and hot to the touch. His skin pulses with fever, and the smell rising from the corner of his mouth is unmistakable, rotting tissue. He tries to speak again, but a grimace interrupts him. You don't need him to finish. This is not a simple pull. You motion him in and lay him down on your bench. You boil water, gather your herbs, set your tools in order. The infection is buried deep, under the molars, and you can feel it radiating inward like a coal under flesh. A jaw abscess, if left alone, it'll suffocate him. Or poison his blood. Or both. You're not calm. But you've done this before. You pack his mouth with clove paste for the pain and make him bite down gently. Then you begin, carefully slicing the inside of the cheek to drain the abscess. You press slowly, steadily, until the pressure gives, and hot fluid spills into the linen you've prepared. He gags, retches, trembles. You keep going. Because this is what you do. And when it's over, he breathes, clearer now. His eyes flutter open. His fever breaks by sundown. He sleeps beside your hearth at night, wrapped in an old cloak. In the morning, he thanks you with a small copper coin and an egg wrapped in cloth. "From our best hen," he says. You nod. And after he leaves, you realize the fear that used to knot your stomach with every new patient, it's not gone. But it's quieter now. Softer. Familiar. It's the same fear you imagine shipbuilders feel when testing a hull. The same dread a midwife holds when the cord wraps wrong. The same tension in every hand that touches someone else's body to heal it. And maybe, just maybe, that fear is what makes you care. Historians still argue whether 14th century healers understood germ theory in any meaningful way. Certainly, they lacked microscopes or Louis Pasteur's insight, but many developed suspiciously effective hygiene rituals: burning soiled cloth, boiling blades, rinsing wounds with vinegar or wine. You've come to trust vinegar like a prayer. It hisses when it cleanses a wound, like steam escaping from rot. One day, a merchant offers you something strange, a small, cloudy crystal lens, stolen from a shipwrecked cargo en route from Venice. He doesn't know what it's for. But you peer through it. And you see something. Not germs, exactly, but clarity. Detail. The tiny texture of skin. The cracks in a tooth's surface. The possibility of seeing more. You trade him for pulled teeth and 2 spoons of ground sage for it. From that day forward, the lens becomes your secret weapon. You use it to examine wounds. To compare blood-streaked pulp with healthy tissue. To inspect tiny fragments left behind after a break. And one afternoon, you use it to examine a pulled tooth and realize, to your horror, that half of it is still embedded in the jaw it came from. You run back to the boy you pulled it from, he's already feverish. You reopen the wound, extract the shard, clean it, pack it again. He lives. You sit by the fire that night, staring at your trembling fingers. And you mutter, "Thank you, little glass." From there, your work becomes faster. Cleaner. More precise. But precision has a cost. People begin to treat you differently. Not just with respect, but suspicion. "Is it true you can see through skin?" a woman asks, voice trembling. "Did you learn that from the Moors?" a farmer demands. "You burn bones under the moon," a child whispers to his friend. That's why he knows where the rot is. You're not hated, exactly. But you are watched. Carefully. And you can't shake the feeling that all this progress is walking a tightrope over a pit. Then one day, a man arrives in your stall not for help, but with an offer. He wears fine boots and a stiff collar. His teeth are too perfect to be real, and he flashes them too often. "I represent a guild," he says, lounging casually on your bench. "Craftsmen of the body. We think it's time your little trade had some structure." You raise an eyebrow. "Structure," he repeats, "means licenses. Standard tools. Set rates. Shared knowledge, but only among approved members. You'd be a founding name. You'd help shape the future." It's tempting. Terribly tempting. A real guild? A place in history? But you've heard this song before. And you know how easily a structure turns into gatekeeping. You remember the herbalist from the symposium who couldn't get church blessing because she was a woman. The Moorish man denied city access. The midwife accused of devilry just for holding dried sage. You decline. He leaves without a word. And the next day, your stall is searched by the local reeve. Officially, he's looking for counterfeit coins. Unofficially, well, the message is clear. You hide your lens. You destroy some notes. You go quiet. For a while. But the mouths still come. A girl with missing canines who wants to sing again. A thief with a loose incisor that clicks when he lies. A baker with flour packed so deep between his molars it sprouted mold. Yes, mold. You nearly fainted. You treat them all. Because this is still your calling. One rainy night, you're awakened by a pounding on the shutters. You groan. You open it. And there she is, the Duchess from long ago, the one with the birchwood bridge. Older now. Paler. But unmistakably her. She smiles. And her teeth, your teeth, still shine. I never forgot, she says. And in her hand is something wrapped in velvet. You open it. It's gold. Real gold. Melt it, she says. Shape it. Start again. And you realize, this isn't just payment. It's permission. To keep going. To keep changing. To keep learning. And as the rain slides down the shutters, and your lens catches the flickering firelight, and your fingers itch to begin carving again, you don't feel like a dentist. You feel like a revolution waiting to happen. You melt the gold. You do it carefully, over a low, steady flame, in a crucible borrowed from the smith's apprentice who owes you for saving his molar last winter. The metal bubbles slowly, turning syrup thick, radiant. You stir it with a charred pine branch, watching the heat purify and transform it, until all that's left is potential. Then you pour. Not into coins. Not into amulets. Into a mold of your own design, a tiny arc, curved to fit the upper teeth of a woman whose bridge will fail within the year. You press it into wax to cool, shaping, testing, adjusting. It's not just gold anymore. It's the future. Gleaming. Custom. Durable. A mouth fit for a duchess, and now, perhaps, for anyone. You've never worked with a metal so fine. But your hands have grown bold with time. You no longer flinch when the scalpel slips, no longer hesitate before cutting deep. Each mistake has built a muscle of its own. And now, with this gold glinting on your bench, you realize, your tools are behind the times. They've been whispering it for weeks, bent forceps, dull hooks, cracked bone saws. You've outgrown them. So you design new ones. You draw by moonlight. Arching handles for leverage. Hinged pincers with gripping teeth. A slim, flattened spatula to press the tongue aside. You carve mock-ups from wood, then beg the smith to forge them in iron. He calls you mad, but he hammers anyway. When they're finished, you test them on ox jaws bought from the butcher. The grip is perfect. The motion, smooth. One by one, you build a set that fits your hands like a glove. And just like that, you're not just using tools, you're inventing them. Historians still argue whether dental tools of this sophistication existed in the 14th century. Some claim they're a Renaissance innovation, others believe evidence has been lost to time, melted down for war or hoarded in private cabinets. You believe they must have existed. Because once you've seen the need, how can you not answer it? Then one day, a priest knocks on your stall. Not to accuse, but to ask. He gestures toward a young novitiate, barely 12, with swollen gums and shaking fingers. You let them in. It's clear this child hasn't eaten in days from pain alone. The priest watches nervously as you work. But when you finish, he does something unexpected, he kneels. Not to pray. To ask questions. How did you learn this? What are these instruments? Could I copy your diagrams? You blink. Then you nod. Later that night, you give him charcoal copies of your notes. It's the first time you've trusted someone with your full designs. And as you hand them over, you say, without thinking, they're not perfect yet. He smiles. Neither are we. After that, the strange visits increase. A traveler from Genoa with a lisp and a titanium implant, a relic from the East, he claims, though you suspect it's just shellacked wood. A veiled woman who brings you an ink-stained parchment, a recipe for soot-based filling paste, discovered in a tomb near Alexandria. A drunken soldier missing 6 teeth who boasts that Mongol shamans once packed his mouth with honey and ants to stop infection. You collect each story. Each secret. Each shard of strange knowledge. And you begin a book. You don't call it a book, of course. Just a sheaf of bound parchment. But it's more than notes. It's history. Diagrams. Recipes. Warnings. Sketches of tools. A list of every patient whose life you couldn't save, names that deserve more than forgetfulness. You keep it hidden. For now. Because the wrong eyes would see it as witchcraft. Treason. Heresy. But to you, it's hope. And then, the letter arrives. Wax sealed. Delivered by a courier with clean nails and perfect teeth, too perfect. Suspiciously perfect. It's an invitation. The royal court is seeking a mouth healer. One of the Queen's retainers has a locked jaw and a rotting tongue. The court physician has failed, the letter says. Your reputation precedes you. You reread the letter 6 times. You turn it over, sniff it, weigh it in your palm. You know this is dangerous. Courts don't just summon. They own. You hesitate for days. But then you pack your tools, your diagrams, your golden bridge. And you go. The journey is cold and silent. You ride with a merchant caravan to avoid bandits. You sleep under carts and trade toothache cures for supper. And every night, you rehearse your story, your words, your warnings, your refusals. The palace is less opulent than you imagined. Gilded, yes, but cracked. Smelling of damp velvet and too much perfume. The air is stale, like no one's opened a window in weeks. They bring you to the retainer. A man of noble bearing, now collapsed in a heap of pillows, jaw stiff with swelling, teeth blackened. He hasn't spoken in days. The Queen's physician stands nearby, arms crossed, fuming. But they let you work. You kneel. You examine. You breathe. And then, with clean hands and a steady grip, you drain the infection. File the teeth. Pack the mouth with salt paste. Stitch what must be stitched. You do not speak. You do not look at the physician. But when the man begins to breathe easier, when he mouths the word water, they all turn to stare at you. You bow. And leave. You don't wait for payment. You don't trust what form it might take. But as you exit, a woman in servant's robes presses something into your hand. A ring. Shaped like a molar. You walk the long road home with gold in your pouch and a question burning in your chest. What am I becoming? Not a guild member. Not a street vendor. Not a priest. But something else. Something new. A title not yet invented. And as your village appears in the distance, and the evening mist curls around your ankles, and your tools clink quietly in their leather case, you realize. You might be carving out a path that one day, centuries from now, someone else will walk. And maybe they'll call it dentistry. But for now, it's just you. And the mouths you mend. The ring sits on your shelf for weeks. You don't wear it. You don't touch it. You just let it sit, gathering a faint patina of dust, as if to dull the memory it carries. Because every time you glance at it, you're reminded not just of the palace, but of what it cost you to walk away. Because the offer came. Of course it did. 2 weeks after you returned, a royal messenger arrived with a scroll bearing the Queen's seal. Inside, a commission. A permanent position at court. Dental surgeon of the realm. A generous stipend, a suite of rooms, access to the royal library. And most dangerous of all, protection from inquisitors. You didn't reply. You didn't even unroll it all the way. Because you know what that really means. It means obedience. Every patient watched. Every diagram inspected. Every word you utter etched into reports you'll never see. And the moment your method stops serving the crown, they'll hang you with the same care they once praised you for. You're not ready to stop being yours. So you bury the letter under a loose floorboard and get back to work. Because work, as it turns out, does not wait. Word has spread. People travel from parishes away. Some bring coin, but many bring goods, salt, barley, even a wooden comb carved in your likeness, which is disturbing, frankly. They call you strange names, tooth whisperer, mouthsmith, even one unforgettable Saint Chewer. You try not to correct them. You're just grateful they don't bring torches. Most of the cases are simple. Gums to clean. Cracked teeth to pull. Bridges to install. But occasionally, something harder lands on your bench. Like the boy with no tongue. He arrives with his grandmother, who says only that the war took it. You don't ask which war, or how, because the way he clenches his fists when she speaks is answer enough. But you do examine him. His mouth is a quiet cave, smooth scar tissue where the muscle should be. He tries to speak, but only air comes out. His teeth are misaligned, his jaw underused. And his eyes ask questions you can't answer. So you build something new. A fitted pallet, wood and wax at first, later reinforced with hammered silver, designed to rest on the upper jaw and help redirect airflow. He'll never speak fluently, but he might form a few sounds. Maybe even a word. You test it with him for days, adjusting millimeters, teaching him to hum. He hums constantly. Hums while walking. Hums while chewing. Hums while sleeping. And then, one morning, he looks at you and hums a clear R. You both freeze. Then he grins. It's the first time you've seen him smile. And just like that, your definition of dentistry expands again. Historians still argue whether medieval prosthodontics, that is, building devices to replace or support parts of the mouth, were widespread or rare. We have fragments, yes, ivory dentures in Rome, silver jaw splints in Islamic texts. But the true stories? They lived in moments like this. Unrecorded. Uncelebrated. Moments when someone's voice returned. It's hard not to feel changed by that. Your diagrams grow stranger. More ambitious. You start sketching not just tools and teeth, but processes. A chart of facial muscles. A side view of jaw rotation. A series of pressure marks on chewing patterns. You build models from wooden gut string. You ask the butcher to save you animal skulls for study. He asks no questions. Your little shack becomes a museum of strange half-creations. And you begin dreaming of something absurd. A school. Not a university, those are for sons of lords and Latin speakers. But a school of the hands. Where barbers, midwives, apothecaries, and healers could all share techniques. Learn from each other. No guilds. No clergy. Just the craft. You even give it a name, scribbled on a wax sheet you tuck into your diagrams. The Sanctum Dentari. You never show it to anyone. But just thinking of it warms your chest. Then, one grey morning, your world shifts again. You wake up to bells, not church bells, but warning bells. Fire in the village square. You run. You find smoke pouring from a row of homes. The baker's chimney collapsed, and half the street is ablaze. You help carry buckets. You help drag children from windows. You help until you're coughing, soaked, soot-covered. And when it's over, you return to your stall. To find it half-burned. Gone are your molds. Your charcoal sketches. Your bridge designs. Gone is your book. But the floorboard still hides your lens. And the molar-shaped ring. You sit down, amidst ash, and breathe. Not in despair. But in resolve. You don't panic. You rebuild. Because loss is no stranger to you. And if your memory serves, and it always has, you'll redraw every sketch. Reforge every tool. Recreate every idea. Better, even. You borrow parchment from the priest. Recarve your bridges. Recast your tools. And when the boy with no tongue returns, humming proudly with his new silver plate, you know you made the right choice. The fire could not destroy what you became. And one night, long after sunset, a courier returns. No message this time. Just a parcel. Wrapped in velvet. Inside, the book. Your book. Saved by someone you don't remember. Copied in careful hand. The pages smell faintly of lavender and old ink. And on the final page, a note. Your work mended my daughter. This was the least I could do. You don't cry. But you do light a candle. And begin writing again. Because your sanctum isn't gone. It's just not built yet. And the gold in your drawer? It's waiting. For teeth. For tongues. For voices. And for tomorrow. The first time you hold a child's tooth in your hand, still warm from the root, it reminds you of something you can't quite place. Maybe a seed. Maybe a pebble. Maybe something halfway between death and birth. You wrap it in cloth and set it aside, more out of instinct than use. You've kept stranger things, bits of jawbone, a molar with two roots like a twisted tree, a tooth turned almost entirely black from a diet of fermented cabbage and soot. But this one feels different. It's not the tooth that matters, it's the timing. Because the child didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Just sat still and opened his mouth like you'd asked, trusting that whatever happened next would be okay. That kind of trust, it does something to you. And it changes how you think about pain. You've been so focused on what you can do with your hands, cut, clean, carve, pull. You've forgotten what your voice is for. So you begin to speak more. Not just instructions. Reassurances. You tell your patients what you're doing, even when they don't ask. You explain how a certain root curves, how a certain salve might sting but won't scar, how some pain is good, it means the body remembers how to fight. You even start humming. It feels foolish at first. But then the children join in. And sometimes the adults, too. The barber calls you mad. But his daughter brings you honeycomb wrapped in linen every week, so you figure he's just jealous. And then the girl arrives. 12, maybe 13. Eyes sharp, hands even sharper. She watches you work for hours. At first you assume she's lost, or curious, or maybe just fascinated by blood. But then, one day, she says it. I want to learn. You pause, scalpel midair. Learn what? How to fix mouths. You study her. She's serious. Fierce, even. The kind of serious that doesn't come from play or play pretend. You ask her to return the next day. She does. And again the day after. Before long, she's cleaning tools, measuring bridge molds, even drawing diagrams with her left hand when her right is tired. She names all 32 adult teeth by heart and starts inventing her own terms for problems you never had names for. You tell her she reminds you of you. She says she hopes not. You laugh. She doesn't. You don't name her your apprentice. That word belongs to the guilds, and they would never recognize her anyway. But you give her tasks. Teach her how to feel for swelling. How to recognize the sound of infection. How to make someone feel seen, even when their mouth is full of cotton and pain. One day, she pulls a tooth. It's clean. Swift. Perfect. She doesn't smile, but you do. Historians still argue whether women participated meaningfully in medieval medical fields. Some say they were confined to midwifery or herbalism. Others point to scattered manuscripts and anonymous case notes that suggest otherwise. You think the truth is simpler, they were there, they just weren't written down. You write her down. Every week, you note what she learns. What she sees. What she says. You call it observations from the girl who sees too much. You never show her the pages. Yet. Meanwhile, your patients keep evolving. They're not just poor now. Word has reached the curious. A scribe with a crooked bite that's affecting his Latin dictation. A mason with locked jaw from years of chewing cold mortar. A baker whose teeth are so worn, he swears he can taste the wood of the oven more than the bread he bakes. You treat them all. But they don't just leave fixed, they leave changed. They stop spitting blood casually. They brush with cloth more often. They rinse with salt. They think about their teeth. About their mouths. About what goes into them. It's as if you've planted a seed. Not just in bone. In culture. You even start writing small pamphlets, tiny things, more pictures than words. How to clean. What to chew. Why you should never, ever, try to file your own teeth with a millstone. You pin them to the church doors. Half disappear. The other half? You find them folded in aprons. Tucked into thatched roofs. Memorized by shepherds who whistle while they floss with rye stalks. You've become contagious. One day, the girl asks, "Are we still dentists?" The question catches you off guard. Because the truth is, you're not sure anymore. You're something larger than that now. You've become part healer, part teacher, part village philosopher of the mouth. You talk about diet. About balance. About listening to the body. You've learned that sometimes it's not the tooth that's broken, but the person attached to it. You pause. Then say, "No. We're something older. And something new." And she nods, like she understands. Maybe she does. Maybe she always did. You begin building again. Not just tools. Furniture. A proper chair with a reclined back and a footrest, so patients don't need to lie across a barrel or kneel on sacks of grain. A hanging lantern for evening procedures. A rinsing basin shaped like a smiling face, because laughter, oddly enough, helps the jaw loosen. Your little shack is now something between a clinic and a curiosity shop. People start calling it the tooth house. Children dare each other to peek inside. One of them, clever, missing 2 front teeth, draws a picture of you on the door. It's hideous. Wild hair. Giant hands. A cape made of molars. You leave it there. Because you're starting to like who you're becoming. And even more, who you're creating. 1 girl. 100 patients. 1,000 teeth. And a future you can almost taste. By now, your hands are rarely clean. They're always ink-stained, wax-dusted, or gloved in the faint aroma of clove oil and copper filings. The girl, who now answers to Mouse more than her real name, calls them ghost hands. She says they never stop moving, even in sleep. Once, she swore they reached for a missing bridge mid-dream. You pretend to be annoyed. But privately, you hope she's right. Because your hands are building something even bigger than teeth. They're building infrastructure. You've added a second bench to your shop. Not just for space, but because Mouse deserves one. You give her tools that fit her fingers. A set of carved molds, painted with symbols only the 2 of you understand. A recipe book bound in twine that includes everything from infection poultices to honey vinegar rinse for mouth rot. And then, you add a door. Not just a door. A back door. Which doesn't sound important until you remember what it means. It means you no longer fear what's outside. You no longer hide your best work in floorboards or behind false walls. The door opens to a garden, patchy, overgrown, but still, a space. You plant time. You build a stool for reading in the sun. You even sketch patients out here, capturing how they sit after the pain is gone. That soft tilt of relief. That exhale that says, "I didn't think I'd survive this." It becomes your favorite posture in the world. One morning, Mouse surprises you. She's redesigned the bridge mold system. Instead of one arch for all mouths, she's made adjustable inserts, so you can swap pieces to fit narrow jaws, wide palates, and even gaps where teeth never erupted. You're stunned. You're also a little jealous. Historians still argue whether innovation in medieval medicine was truly inventive, or merely a slow repackaging of old Roman and Arabic texts. Some say the period was intellectually dormant, others insist creativity simply took different forms. You think both sides miss the point. Because sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is make something that works better today. And that's exactly what Mouse did. You name the new mold the Mouse Assembly. She pretends to hate it. Later, you catch her carving a tiny mouse into the corner of each set. You keep working. But the patients are changing. They're not just villagers now. They come from towns. One even arrives in a wheeled cart. He's a cloth merchant, nose high, accent sharp. He's never sat on anything less than velvet, and he eyes your chair like it might bite him. His complaint? My words whistle. Fix it. Turns out his front teeth were filed into points years ago, some upper-class affectation. But now, after too many winters and too little care, the nerves are exposed. He flinches every time he says the word silk. You remove the points. Cap them with bone. Smooth his bite. He glares at the mirror, lips pursed. Then says silk. No whistle. He grins. It's unsettling. He pays you in silver buttons and a bolt of cloth so blue, it feels like staring at sky trapped in linen. You use it to line the new patient napkins. Mouse makes a smock. You even hang a curtain over the door. The tooth house, now, has style. You can't help but smile. But then the Inquisitor returns. Not an Inquisitor. The Inquisitor. Same boots. Same shaved chin. Same eyes that track everything without blinking. He doesn't come in. He waits in the garden. You join him. He doesn't speak for a long time. Then, without looking at you, says, "Do you know how many dentists there are in this province?" You shake your head. 3, he says. And 2 of them only pull teeth. You nod, unsure where this is going. Then, that makes you statistically unusual. You consider your answer carefully. Finally, you say, "I just fix what's broken." He chuckles, just once. Dry. Like a hinge that's never been oiled. Then he hands you a scroll. Another commission. But this one is different. It's not a job, it's a permit. Issued by the diocese. Sealed in wax. Signed by 3 clerics and a lord whose name you've only seen on boundary stones. It grants you, and your assistants, license to practice mouthcraft without guild oversight. You read it 3 times. He watches. Then says, they don't understand what you do. But they like what happens after. People work longer. Eat better. Stop spitting blood into the communion chalice. He stands. Pauses. Adds, "Don't make me regret this." Then walks away. You sit in the garden long after he's gone, scroll in your lap, time brushing your ankles. You don't tell Mouse right away. You just wait until she's sketching. Then you hand her the scroll. She reads it silently. Then looks at you. Says, "So we're real now." You nod. She squints. "I like being fake better." You laugh. But inside, you feel something shift. Not fear. Not pride. Responsibility. You're no longer just strange healers with clever hands. You're a precedent. Others might follow. Others might copy. Which means you have to keep leading. You hang the permit in the shop. Just above the rinsing basin. Not so high it feels sacred. But just visible enough that every patient sees it, reads it, and realizes. This isn't just luck. It's earned. And it's just the beginning. You start dreaming in teeth. Not metaphors, literal teeth. Some nights, they float in bowls. Others, they stack into pyramids, each molar engraved with tiny glyphs you can't quite read. Once, you dreamed of a mouth so vast, it echoed when you spoke into it. You tell Mouse. She says, "I dream in gums." Better cushioning. You both laugh, but the truth is, you're both changing. Because you're no longer just tending to disease. You're redesigning the very interface between person and world. Teeth aren't just for chewing. They're the gatekeepers of every story, every emotion, every lie, and truth and unspoken regret. And you're learning that the mouth holds more secrets than any book. This realization hits hardest one cold afternoon, when an old soldier, face like chiseled bark, stumbles into your shop. He doesn't speak at first. Just opens wide. And there it is, a jaw held together with rawhide and resignation. Half the teeth are gone. The rest are cracked from years of chewing jerky, bone, and bitterness. But that's not what stops you. It's the small gold coin tucked beneath his tongue. You blink. He glares. Finally mutters, "It's for the ferryman." If you mess this up. You nod, slowly. Then smile. Well, let's not waste the fare. The procedure takes hours. You have to break old resin, cauterize a gum pocket, even craft a makeshift partial plate from the side of a boiled horncomb. But when it's done, when he clamps his mouth and doesn't flinch, you swear he grows 2 inches taller. He tries to pay with the same coin. You refuse. He insists. You finally accept, but nail it to the wall above the hearth. Next to the mouse insignia. Next to the blue cloth. Next to the words you've begun carving in rough Latin, curators oris, keepers of the mouth. Mouse adds a drawing, a crooked-toothed smile that somehow feels both sarcastic and sacred. It becomes your emblem. And soon, people start copying it. They etch it onto travel staffs. Sew it into cloaks. You hear rumors, quiet ones, of a copycat clinic in the next county. One with a younger man, smaller hands, and a mold design suspiciously similar to Mouse's. She pretends to be furious. Then asks if he's cute. You roll your eyes. But privately, you're proud. Because this is what real change looks like, messy, scattered, impossible to fully control. And, strangely, beautiful. Historians still argue whether medical knowledge in the 14th century was centralized or decentralized. Some say monasteries hoarded it. Others argue folk traditions passed it freely across villages. You think the real answer is, knowledge is like spit. It spreads everywhere, even when you try to bottle it. And your knowledge is definitely spreading. But not everyone is pleased. The local bone setter stops waving when you pass. The apothecary raises his prices on clove oil, muttering about tooth sorcery. Even the priest, once grateful, starts warning against unnatural fixes during sermons. You hear him one day through the window. Teeth were made by God to fall. Interfering is to deny his will. Mouse mutters, tell that to people who chew bark for a living. But you feel the shift. Respect has a shadow, resentment. So you adapt. You stop calling what you do fixing. You start saying restoring what God gave. And you start training others. You host quiet gatherings, nighttime, firelit, whispered like secret rituals. For 5 curious minds at a time. A pig's jawbone. A basin of discarded molars. Mouse sketches each phase. You narrate, gently, sleepily, like casting a spell. One day, a woman returns weeks later. She says, I fixed my brother's infection. I remember the poultice. You hug her. You've never been much of a hugger. But it feels like the right time to start. The guild finally notices. A scroll arrives. No greeting. Just a warning, cease and sanctioned instruction or face censure. Mouse laughs so hard she chokes. You reread the parchment, then add it to the hearth wall. Between the emblem and the ferryman's coin. Because if they're afraid of you, you're probably doing something right. Still, you keep evolving. You experiment with comfort. You stuff seats with straw wrapped in goose feathers. You paint the ceiling with soft scenes, clouds, birds, once even a goat playing a lute. You even pipe in warm water for rinsing, collected from a barrel left in the sun. One patient weeps after his first rinse. Says it feels like angels spitting mercy. Mouse calls it disgusting. You both keep it. And then, without warning, a letter. From the city. A summons. To present your methods before a council of healers and bishops. Mouse reads it, then says, are we being knighted or burned? You reply, yes. But you go. Not because you seek approval. Because you want to show them what real care looks like. So you travel. You pack your molds. Your sketches. Your jawbone diagrams. The blue cloth. A bowl of rinsing herbs. And one small tooth, a baby incisor, saved long ago, still smooth, still sacred. Mouse insists on carrying it. And you let her. Because even if no one else understands what it means, you do. It's the root of everything. The city breathes differently. You feel it the moment you pass through the outer gate. The air smells of boiled leather, coal smoke, horse dung, and something faintly metallic, like ink and old coins. Everything moves too fast. Wheels clatter. Bells chime at random. People don't walk so much as dart, weaving like fish through alleyways with purpose so sharp, you wonder if they're all late to something sacred. Mouse is silent beside you. But her eyes never stop moving. You keep a hand on the satchel. Inside are your tools, your notes, your future. The summons had been signed with a gold sigil, Ordo Salus Maxima, a hybrid council of bishops, surgeons, and political advisors tasked with regulating acceptable bodily interventions. You'd heard of them, of course. But only in the way peasants speak of weather, distant, inevitable, and best ignored until it ruins your roof. Now, you're climbing their marble stairs. The antechamber is carved from stone so pale it glows. There's no fire, yet the air is warm, a kind of heat that feels baked into the walls, like they've absorbed centuries of judgment and now radiate it into your bones. They call your name. You step forward. You expect a council of robed elders. Instead, you're greeted by a semicircle of thin-lipped men and one woman with braids coiled like ropes of bread. They're clean. Too clean. Fingernails trimmed to ivory slivers. Not one bears a single ink stain or tooth scratch. You're offered no seat. Only questions. So many questions. Is the horn you use from Christian livestock? How do you guarantee a patient's soul is not compromised during unconsciousness? What of cases where the pain returns? Do you admit failure? You answer as best you can. Clearly. Calmly. You say infection instead of rot. You say imbalance of humors instead of flesh gone sour. You show them your tools, the mold plates, the bone-hinged bridge that Mouse helped design. They murmur. One asks, why do you insist on restoring teeth instead of removing them? You say, because every lost tooth is a lost word. And because God did not give us stones to chew with. The woman with braided hair tilts her head. You can't read her. Then, show us. You blink. She clarifies, we've arranged for a patient. And then they bring him in. He's young, no older than Mouse. His cheeks sunken. Breath shallow. One eye swollen shut. A noble's page, from the look of his clothes. They say, he has an abscess beneath the lower molars. It has spread into the jaw. What would you do? You step forward. Kneel beside him. Speak low, as you always do. Hello, you say. This will hurt. But not forever. You glance back at Mouse, who's already laid out the basin, the herbs, the wax thread, the copper stylus for draining. And then you work. In front of an audience that does not blink. The incision is clean. The drainage fast. You catch the stink of it, like spoiled wine and regret, and you keep going. You pack the wound with clove-doused linen, cradle the boy's head as he coughs, and whisper the same words your old teacher once muttered. Pain is the body talking. Let it speak, then shush it gently. When you rise, your knees crack. But the boy is breathing evenly. You step back. The council is silent. Then, at last, the woman speaks. We expected charlatanry. She taps a finger on the bench. This is practice. One of the men mutters, but it lacks formal lineage. There is no root text. No licensed mentor. She raises a brow. Neither did Adam. They issue you a decree. Not a ban. A recognition. You are henceforth named Magister Oris, Master of the Mouth. It sounds ridiculous. You try not to laugh. They give you a chain, copper, not gold, and a scroll you can barely read, full of wax stamps and phrases like jurisprudence of mandibular aid. But Mouse is grinning so hard, you let the title rest on your shoulders like it belongs there. Afterward, you eat your first proper city meal. Pigeon stew. Warm bread. A tart made from figs so sweet they make your teeth ache. Mouse asks for seconds. You give her yours. Then comes the invitation. A healer from across the sea. She watched your demonstration. Her name is Leia. She works in a coastal city where shipbuilders lose teeth to salted rations and swinging ropes. She wants you to come teach. Not forever. Just one season. You hesitate. Then say, only if Mouse is invited too. She nods. Mouse chokes on her tart. Later, in the inn, you stare at the chain on your bedside table. Master of the Mouth. You wonder what your teacher would think. He once told you, to be a healer is to die in pieces. A bit of you for every patient. You touch the scroll. You still have pieces left. Historians still argue whether independent medical practices outside the university model were legitimate. Some call them fringe. Others say they were the heart of real care. You think that's missing the point. You didn't set out to be legitimate. You set out to stop people from suffering alone. And now, a path has opened wider. One that stretches all the way to the sea. That night, Mouse says, "Do you think there'll be sand?" You nod. And teeth? You smile. Always. You've never seen the sea before. The stories never did it justice. It's not just big, it's impossibly alive. It moves like breath. Like sleep. Like someone older than time is turning in their bed under a blue blanket that never quite stays still. Mouse is speechless for once, a chunk of salted bread halfway to her mouth. Her eyes are wide. You don't say anything either. Because the air here is different. Wet, yes, but heavy with promise. And brine. And rot. And something sharp beneath it all, like a fish's spine hiding in a pillow. Your new city is louder than the last. Dock workers yell in a dozen dialects. Children race barefoot along piers. A merchant with stained fingers tries to sell you the genuine whale enamel before you've even stepped off the boat. Leia, your host, laughs. Welcome, she says, to the mouth of the world. You squint. She gestures around. Everything passes through here eventually, spices, souls, bad decisions. Why not you? You like her immediately. She leads you through tight, slanted alleys to her clinic, which smells of lemon peel and boiling water. It's cleaner than any place you've worked before. There are drains carved into the stone floors. Hooks for drying tools in the sun. An entire cabinet full of powders with names you don't recognize. But teeth? Teeth are the same. Rot here smells like rot back home. Gums still swell. Children still cry. You get to work. You teach Leia your mold technique. She teaches you how to make antiseptic rinse from powdered coral and fermented quince. Mouse sketches the cross-section of a sailor's jawbone after a rope snap fractured his cheek. You see your first case of sailor's teeth, a strange rot that starts not at the gum line, but inside the enamel itself. Leia believes it's from weeks without citrus. Mouse just calls it dry mouth's revenge. You treat it by stuffing orange peel and mint into wax molds and having patients bite down for an hour a day. One patient complains he tastes like holiday bread. You tell him it beats tasting like death. He agrees. Over time, your methods start showing up everywhere. You see children carrying bundles of mint twine in their pockets. A dock worker carves your crooked tooth emblem into the handle of his hook knife. A priest, more curious than condemning, asks for a demonstration. You show him the mouth's hidden geometry, how pain echoes, how grief leaves its fingerprints between molars. He nods, then surprises you, Christ healed with touch. Why not wax? Not everyone is so open. One local physician, a man named Belsius, accuses you of crafting faucets for profit. You tell him your patients can chew for the first time in years. He says that's vanity. You say vanity tastes delicious with roast duck. He doesn't laugh. Mouse does. Loudly. Historians still argue whether early dentists were more craftspeople or healers. Whether their work served function or simply the rich. The truth, you've found, is this: a person in pain will crawl across a continent if they believe you can make the hurting stop. And whether you stitch, saw, or sculpt, it matters less than how you show up. And you're showing up. Every day. One morning, Leia takes you to a market stall shaped like a ship's prow. There, an old woman with cataracts runs her fingers across your cheek and says, "You bring quiet to mouths that scream." It's the best compliment you've ever received. And then comes the letter. Mouse brings it to you, still sealed with blue wax. The handwriting is spidery, familiar. It's from your old teacher. Not dead, after all. He's heard of your title. Your work. He's not surprised. He invites you home. Not to reclaim your apprenticeship. To speak. To teach. Mouse is practically vibrating. Leia says, you should go. You say nothing at first. Because leaving again means something different now. It means stepping into a life where you are the voice others listen to. Where your mistakes shape whole methods. Where your successes echo through mouths you'll never meet. It means growing into the role your old teacher once held, and maybe surpassing it. That night, you sit by the sea and watch the moon split the waves into silver teeth. Mouse leans beside you, flicking a fishbone between her fingers. You scared? She asks. You nod. She nods too. Then says, let's go scare them back. You return home taller. Not in stature, though Mouse swears your spine has finally uncurled, but in the way people glance up from what they're doing when you walk past. They remember you, but not like before. No longer the apprentice. No longer the strange one with bones in your satchel and wax under your nails. Now, you're master of the mouth. And your shadow lands a little heavier on the cobblestones. Your old teacher greets you in his garden, surrounded by withered herbs and squeaking pigeons. He hasn't changed much. A little slower in the hands, perhaps. A little more bone than beard now. But his eyes are still the same muddy grey, sharp at the edges like broken glass. He says nothing at first. Just gestures for you to sit. Mouse perches on a stone wall nearby, chewing a fig and pretending not to listen. So, he says finally, they call you Magister now. You shrug. Better than charlatan. He smiles, but only with one corner of his mouth. Not always. You spend the afternoon walking him through everything. The molds. The antiseptic rinses. The sailor's rot. The council's decree. He doesn't interrupt, just listens, nods, occasionally raises an eyebrow like he's filed away a question for later. When you finish, he asks, and what have you unlearned? The question stumps you. He repeats it. Slower. What have you had to forget to get this far? You think of the leeches. The prayers whispered over broken enamel. The shame you once felt using your own hands instead of sanctioned tools. The conviction that pain was punishment, not a signal. You say, almost everything. He nods. Good. That night, you give your first formal teaching session in the town square. You expect maybe 10 people. A few curious healers. Maybe a monk or two. Instead, nearly 100 show up. Some bring their own chairs. Others lean in doorways. A few mothers carry children with bundled cloth around their jaws. You stand beneath a lantern swinging in the breeze and begin. You talk about nerves and how teeth hold memory. You describe how infection isn't a curse but a process, and a reversible one at that. You demonstrate how a bit of wax and cloth can relieve pressure when the tooth won't budge until the swelling breaks. Mouse passes around samples of mint thread, dried rose bark, and beeswax infused with wine. You expect skepticism. You get silence. Then questions. How do you ease the fear before cutting? Does chewing on bone help like they say? Is it true a swallowed tooth can curse your stomach? You answer all of them. Patiently. Kindly. Even the silly ones. Especially the silly ones. Because those are the questions people actually carry. Historians still argue whether public medical instruction was enlightened or just unlicensed showmanship. But here, under the stars, your only spotlight a flickering oil lamp, it feels like neither. It feels like sharing. Like letting a secret out into the air where it can finally breathe. That winter, your reputation spreads faster than frost. Other apprentices arrive. From neighboring villages, distant cities. Even a few monks with crooked smiles and careful hands. They call it the Mouth School. You hate the name. Mouse insists it stays. The first student you ever dismiss, kindly, but firmly, comes after he demands you show him how to bleed the devil from a molar. You say, no devils in teeth. Only decay. He huffs and stomps out. You don't mind. Because the next day, a midwife asks how to soothe a teething child without burning rosemary. You give her a carved poppy root ring instead. She cries. Says her daughter slept for 3 hours straight. You feel like a saint. Well, almost. Sometimes, the past creeps back. In the form of a patient with nothing left but stubs in their gums. In the eyes of an old man who says, if only this had come sooner. In the night, when you still dream of cracked enamel and screams in darkened rooms. But now, you wake to a different sound. The rustle of notes. The scribble of mouse drafting diagrams. The clink of clean tools being arranged on a table for morning rounds. You're not alone anymore. You haven't been for a while. One evening, your old teacher visits your makeshift school. Watches silently as you guide 3 students through a gum incision. When you finish, he pulls you aside. You've built something. You nod. It'll outlive you, he says. You nod again. Then he grins, unexpectedly wide. But only if you keep your molars out of politics. You laugh. Because too late for that. In the spring, a messenger brings a scroll. A bishop has requested a visit. To examine this heretical oral practice. His words. Mouse draws a little angry bishop with fangs in the margin. You prepare for the worst. But when he arrives, robes and all, he surprises you. He has 3 rotten teeth. And a lisp. He doesn't come to condemn. He comes to ask if you can fix it. And you do. Afterward, he whispers, blessed are the peacemakers. Especially when they restore my sermons. You get your first donation the next day. It's a crate of lemon sap and goose quills. From a bishop. So it begins. You've never had a doorbell before. Now you have 3. One for students, one for patients, and one, for some reason Mouse refuses to explain, rigged to a hollow good that plays a horrible wheeze when pulled. The school has grown faster than you expected. The original workroom has spilled into 2 more buildings, both of which used to be goat storage and still smell faintly of regret. And you're no longer the only one teaching. Leia has arrived from the coast, bringing with her citrus salves, fireproof aprons, and stories about fish rot you didn't ask for but now can't stop thinking about. An ex-baker from the north has devised a technique using warmed bread molds to treat misaligned jaws. You call it the crust method. He hates that. Mouse, who insists she is not a student, now runs the daily schedule, keeps lecture time sacred, and will personally remove anyone who talks over you. Even bishops. You once pulled a tooth from a merchant who tried to haggle with her. He left with a discount, and one less incisor. Historians still argue whether institutions like yours were legitimate medical schools or simply charismatic cults. You don't mind. Because day after day, you see things you never thought possible. A 10-year-old student who corrects your nerve diagram. An elderly healer who rewrites a village's dental rite using sterilized bone picks. A blind girl who memorizes every nerve cluster by touch alone and teaches others how to feel pain before it festers. It's humbling. And sometimes overwhelming. You fall asleep most nights mid-sentence, ink-stained, arms wrapped around draft scrolls, half a fig still in your mouth. Mouse steals it. Every time. One evening, after a lecture on jaw realignment, a man approaches you with a smile so wide it feels like sunlight. He says, "You don't remember me." You blink. He's right. Then he opens his mouth, and it clicks. The sailor. The one with the snapped cheekbone. From the port city. He'd been your first surgical molding attempt. You'd fashioned him a soft splint from quince bark and fish glue. He holds up that same mold. Wrapped in linen. Preserved. "I kept it," he says. "Saved my life." You don't know what to say. Instead, you hug him. The students cheer. Mouse whistles. You have that mold framed. The only thing you've ever hung on the wall. Not long after, a debate breaks out among your students. Not a brawl, but it gets close. They argue over your early wax method. One insists it traps rot. Another swears it's the reason her aunt can chew again. You step in, ready to settle it, but Mouse pulls you aside. "Don't," she says. "Let them chew on it." And for once, you do. Because it means they're thinking for themselves. It means you've finally done what your old teacher once asked. You've taught them to forget what they were told. And learn something new. That night, you write your first manuscript. Not a diary. Not a lecture script. A proper manual. It's called The Mouth Beneath, Notes on Pain, Shape, and Story. You dedicate it to 3 people. Your first patient, the girl with the honey rot molar. Your old teacher, who taught you how to question with silence. Mouse, who still draws fanged bishops in the margins. It circulates quickly. You hear rumors it's been translated into 4 languages. A monk from the east sends you a clay tablet etched with your mold pattern. A merchant from across the sea writes to say your poppy root bite ring is curing more than teething, it's calming anxious minds. You consider rewriting the manual under a new title, How to Soothe a World with Too Many Teeth. But you keep the old one. Because it's not just about mouths anymore. It's about memory. And listening. And fixing things you didn't break, but can still help heal. One morning, you find Mouse asleep at your desk. She's surrounded by scrolls. In the center, a draft for a second school. Different region. Different dialect. Same mission. You place a blanket over her shoulders and smile. Because the next generation isn't waiting. It's already here. And it's got sharper teeth than you ever dared grow. You don't notice it at first. How the days stretch out longer. How the questions grow deeper. How your hands, once restless with uncertainty, now move with the calm rhythm of ritual. You're older now. Not old. Not yet. But there's a slowness in your bones that didn't used to be there. Your back stiffens after long procedures. Your eyes ache after reading by candlelight. Sometimes you forget names for a moment, and then they rush back like startled birds. But the work? The work still sings. Today, a student you've never met before introduces herself by saying, "My grandmother says you made her stop crying when she was 6. You nod, smile. Mouse, now taller than you, chimes in, "They do that." Weird, right? She's not your assistant anymore. She's your equal. Possibly more. She runs half the lectures now. Sometimes more. Her diagrams are clearer than yours ever were. Her humor, sharper. Her waxwork, flawless. She started wearing your crooked tooth emblem, but she's redesigned it. Now it loops into a question mark. You approve. The second school opened last year. The third breaks ground soon. You've been asked to visit both, to offer guidance, to cut ribbons, to pose with giant teeth made of wood for reasons you don't fully understand. You prefer staying here. The old city. The sea nearby. The clink of tools in warm water, the gentle murmur of students reading aloud, the smell of mint and old paper. One evening, your old teacher returns. He doesn't knock, just walks in with the audacity of someone who once told you everything you believed was wrong. He sits beside you, both of you watching a student recite nerve clusters to a terrified goat. You don't speak for a while. Then he says, "You've become a heretic." You grin. "I had good teachers." He nods. Doesn't argue. Later, after the goat has been freed and your students scatter to evening chores, you walk through the corridors of your clinic school hybrid. You pause in front of a wall where patient notes hang beside sketches and thank you letters. Some are decades old. Some are written in crayon. One reads, "I don't cry anymore when I eat. I like apples now. Thank you." Another simply says, "You listened." Historians still argue whether your schools were revolutionary or just quaint blips in the march of progress. Whether your methods had lasting medical merit or were just an early form of rural myth-making. You don't care. Because tomorrow, a child with a jaw that won't close right will walk through your door. And someone you trained will help them eat again. Because pain has never cared about legacy. Only relief. And now, relief has a blueprint. One that doesn't involve holy water, leeches, or burning herbs. One that begins with listening and ends with a quiet smile. You sit outside under the stars that night, wrapped in an old wool shawl Mouse insists is hideous. She's wrong. The wind from the sea still smells like brine and promise. Somewhere in the distance, someone's laughing. Somewhere closer, someone is dreaming. You close your eyes and imagine a world where no one fears opening their mouth. And for the first time in your life, you think maybe, just maybe, that world is possible. So now, let the images soften. Let the clink of tools fade into the hush of a warm, lamplit room. The scent of mint and beeswax still lingers on the air, and somewhere nearby, water is boiling gently, not rushed, just steady, like breath. You've seen a life unfold, not of war, or royalty, or grand cathedrals, but of quiet revolutions carried out in bone and gum. You've seen how knowledge passed from hands to hands can ripple through time like a calm tide. Your fingers, once tentative, now rest without tension. Your shoulders have forgotten how to hunch. You've helped so many sleep better, and tonight, it's your turn. So sink into your blankets. Let your thoughts slow. No more strange tools to name, no more strange teeth to soothe. Just the familiar rhythm of your breath and the soft press of the pillow beneath your cheek. The world will still be there in the morning, unfixed, unfinished, but a little kinder than before. Because of you. So rest now, friend. The lights are low, the sea is calm, and the night hums with the quiet music of things well mended. Sweet dreams.